I thought surviving chemo was the hardest part until I came home and my daughter-in-law screamed at me to go die somewhere else. I was left outside, helpless, until my son pulled up. What he did next? Let's just say the entire neighborhood still hasn't recovered from the shock. Stay with me, because you won't want to miss the ending, you know? I always thought the hardest part of chemo would be the treatments themselves, the endless poking and prodding, the cold hospital sheets, the taste of metal in my mouth that not even my favorite lemon drops could fix. But as I shuffled up the front steps of my own house that afternoon, clutching my little bag of hospital snacks like it was the Hope Diamond, I realized I was wrong. The hardest part was coming home, feeling like a shell of myself and not knowing what kind of welcome I'd get. I remember pausing at the door just for a second to catch my breath. My legs felt like overcooked spaghetti, and my head was spinning from the car ride. I could still hear the nurse's voice in my ear. Take it easy, Mrs. Miller. Rest, hydrate, and let your family take care of you. Family, that word used to mean something warm and safe. I pressed the doorbell, hoping for a little of that warmth, or at the very least, a smile from my daughter-in-law, Megan. Now, Megan and I have always had what you might call a cordial relationship. Not exactly best friends, but we managed. She's the type who likes things just so her house spotless, her schedule tight, her coffee with exactly 2 sugars and a splash of oat milk. I always tried to stay out of her way, especially since my son Jason worked long hours and she was home more than he was. But today, I was just hoping for a soft place to land. The door swung open so fast I nearly lost my balance. There she was, standing in her yoga pants and a top that, probably, cost more than my entire wardrobe. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my hospital wristband, the scarf covering my thinning hair, the tired slump of my shoulders. For a split second, I thought I saw something like concern flicker across her face. But then, just as quickly, it was gone, and then she said it. Go die somewhere else. Her voice was sharp, slicing through the quiet afternoon like a knife. Before I could even process the words, she slammed the door in my face. The sound echoed down the street, and I swear even the birds stopped singing for a moment. I just stood there, frozen. You've ever been so shocked you just stand there, mouth open, like a fish out of water? That was me. I wasn't sure if I should laugh, cry, or just sit down right there on the welcome mat and take a nap. I mean, what do you do in that situation? Call an Uber to the nearest park bench? Text your son, hey, your wife just told me to go die. Somewhere else, any chance you're coming home soon? The absurdity of it all almost made me giggle. But I was too tired for even that. I looked down at my bag, the one the nurse had packed for me with crackers, ginger ale, and a little note. That said, you're stronger than you think. At that moment, I didn't feel strong at all. I felt invisible. It's like I'd been erased from my own family story. I sat down on the porch step, the cool concrete seeping through my thin pants, and tried to catch my breath. My hands were shaking. Whether from the chemo or the shock, I couldn't tell. I glanced around, hoping maybe a neighbor would see me and offer a kind word, or at least a glass of water. But all I saw were curtains twitching, blinds shifting, everyone peeking, no one helping. Isn't it funny how people love a bit of drama as long as they don't have to get involved? I could almost hear them whispering, isn't that Jason's mother? What's she doing out there? Did something happen? Oh, something happened. All right. I tried to remember the last time Megan and I had a real conversation. Maybe it was last Thanksgiving when she complained about the stuffing being too dry. Or maybe it was Christmas when she gave me a candle that smelled like pine needles and said, it's for your room in case you want to keep the door closed. Subtle, right? But this was a whole new level. I thought about calling Jason, but I didn't want to cause trouble. He worked so hard, and the last thing he needed was to come home to a war zone. Besides, what would I even say? Hi, honey. Your wife just evicted me from my own house. Any suggestions? I could almost hear his sigh on the other end of the line, the way he always tried to keep the peace. But today, there was no peace to keep. As I sat there, the minutes stretched on, each one heavier than the last. I watched a squirrel dart across the lawn, its cheeks stuffed with acorns, and wondered if it had a better home life than I did. I thought about my own mother, how she would have marched right back in there and given Megan a piece of her mind. But I wasn't my mother. I was just tired, sick, and, for the first time in my life, truly alone. And yet, somewhere deep down, tiny spark of stubbornness flickered. Maybe it was the chemo talking, or maybe it was just plain old pride. But I decided right then and there, I wasn't going to let Megan or anyone decide when my story ended. Not today, so I sat up a little straighter, pulled my scarf tighter around my head, and waited. Because if life had taught me anything, it was that you never know what's coming next. And sometimes, the worst moments are just the beginning of a story you never expected to tell. I sat there on the porch, feeling about as welcome as a skunk at a garden party. The concrete step was cold and hard beneath me, but I was too drained to care. My little hospital bag sat at my feet, looking as forlorn as I felt. If anyone had driven by, they might have thought I was a lost delivery, maybe a rejected Amazon package, left out in the elements because nobody wanted to sign for me. I tried to muster up some dignity, straightening my scarf and brushing invisible crumbs from my lap, but honestly, I was just hoping I wouldn't fall asleep and drool all over the welcome mat. That would really give the neighbors something to talk about. Speaking of neighbors, I could feel their eyes on me. Do you know that feeling when you just know someone's watching? I glanced up and, sure enough, saw the telltale flicker of curtains and the quick snap of blinds. Mrs. Whitaker across the street was probably already on the phone with her sister, whispering, "You'll never guess what's happening at the Millers again." I almost wanted to wave just to give them a real show, but my arms felt like lead. Instead, I just sat there trying to look like I belonged, even though I felt like an outsider in my own life. Time seemed to stretch and warp. It's the way it does when you're waiting for anything to happen. By counting the cracks in the sidewalk, but my mind kept drifting back to Megan's words. Go die somewhere else. The cruelty of it stung more than the chemo ever could. Day she decided to say it out loud. Either way, it was a punch to the gut. I was so lost in my thoughts that I almost didn't hear the car pull up. But then there it was, the familiar rumble of Jason's old sedan. The one he refused to trade in because it's got character. Mom. Relief washed over me, warm and sudden. My son was home. Surely he'd make things right. I tried to stand, but my legs wobbled, so I stayed put, waiting for him to come to me. Jason got out of the car, juggling his work bag and a cup of coffee, looking every bit the tired dad who'd just finished a long day. He glanced at the house, then at me, and in that instant, his whole demeanor changed. His face went from weary to thunderous in a heartbeat. You ever see a grown man turn into the Hulk? Spoiler, it's both terrifying and a little bit funny. His jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed, and I could practically see the steam coming out of his ears. He strode over, coffee forgotten, and knelt down beside me. Mom, what happened? Why are you out here? His voice was gentle, but I could hear the anger simmering just beneath the surface. I tried to brush it off, to make light of the situation. Oh, you know me, just getting some fresh air, I joked weakly. But he wasn't buying it. He looked me over, taking in the hospital bag, the scarf, the exhaustion etched into my face. Did Megan? He started, but I shook my head not. I didn't want to be the reason for another fight between them. But Jason wasn't having it. He stood up, his shoulders squared, and marched to the front door. Now, I've seen my son angry before, usually when the Bears lose or when someone cuts him off in traffic, but this was different. This was protective, righteous anger. He pounded on the door so hard I thought he might break it. The neighbor's curtains parted even wider, and I could almost hear Mrs. Whitaker gasp. Megan opened the door, her face a mask of annoyance that quickly shifted to surprise when she saw Jason's expression. "What's going on?" she snapped, but Jason didn't flinch. "Why is my mother sitting on the porch?" he demanded, his voice low and steady. Megan rolled her eyes, crossing her arms. "She just showed up. I told her we weren't ready for visitors." Visitors. Fie, as if I was some distant relative. Not the woman who raised her husband. Jason's face darkened. "She's not a visitor, Megan. She lives here. And she just got out of the hospital." Its words hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. Megan huffed, muttering something about boundaries, but Jason cut her off. "We'll talk about this later," he said, his tone brooking no argument. He turned back to me, his anger melting into concern. "Come on, Mom, let's get you inside." He offered his arm, and I took it, grateful for the support. As we walked past Megan, she glared at me, but I kept my head high. I wasn't going to let her see me cry. Inside the house felt different, colder somehow. Jason led me to the living room and helped me settle onto the couch. He brought me a glass of water and sat beside me, his hand resting on mine. "I'm so sorry, Mom," he whispered. "This shouldn't have happened." I squeezed his hand. Too tired to say much, but grateful beyond words for his presence. The longest 5 minutes of my life had finally ended. But I knew the real storm was just beginning. Still, for the first time that day, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe things would get better. Maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as alone as I thought, and as I glanced out the window, I caught Mrs. Whitaker giving me a thumbs up from across the street. I couldn't help but smile. Maybe the neighborhood was watching, but at least now they were rooting for me. If you've ever witnessed a real family showdown, do you know there's a certain electricity in the air crackle that makes your heart race and your palms sweat? Oh, even if you're just a bystander. Oh, let me tell you, the air in our little cul-de-sac that evening was practically humming. After Jason helped me inside and made sure I was settled, he paced the living room like a caged lion. I could see the storm brewing in his eyes, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a strange mix of fear and excitement. I'd always known my son was a good man, but I'd never seen him quite like this, protective, determined, and, dare I say, a little bit heroic. He took a deep breath, squared his shoulders, and marched straight to the front door. I watched. From the couch, my heart thumping in my chest. He pounded on the door with such force that the pictures on the wall rattled. For a split second, I worried he might actually break it down. The neighbors, who had been peeking through their windows all afternoon, were now openly gawking. I could almost hear the collective gasp as Megan appeared in the doorway, her expression smug and unbothered, at least until she saw Jason's face. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. There was a calmness about him, the kind that comes right before a tornado touches down. "Megan," he said, his voice low and steady, "we need to talk now." She tried to brush him off, rolling her eyes and muttering something about drama, but Jason stood his ground. He looked her dead in the eye and said, loud enough for the whole neighborhood to hear, "If my mother isn't welcome here, then neither. Am I pack your things? We're leaving." This could have heard a pin drop. The neighbors, who had been pretending to water their plants or check their mail, were now frozen in place, eyes wide, mouths open. "I have expected someone to start selling popcorn on the sidewalk," Megan sputtered, her confidence crumbling. "What are you talking about? Can't be serious." She snapped, but Jason didn't flinch. "I've never been more serious in my life," he replied, his voice unwavering. "My mother just came home from the hospital. She's sick, she's tired, and she needs her family. If you can't find it in your heart to show her a little kindness, then I don't want to be here either. So you have a choice. Either we treat her with the respect she deserves, or we both leave. Right now." For a moment, I thought Megan might argue. She opened. Her mouth closed it, then opened it again, like a goldfish gasping for air. But Jason was resolute. He turned to me, his eyes softening. "Come on, Mom. You're coming home with me." He offered me his arm, and I took it, my hands trembling not just from weakness. But from the sheer shock of it all, as we walked past Megan, she stood there, speechless, her face a mixture of anger and disbelief. I almost felt sorry for her almost. But then I remembered the sting of her words. It's the way she'd slammed the door in my face, and any sympathy I might have felt evaporated. This was my son's house, my family, and for the first time in a long time I felt like I belonged. The neighbors watched as Jason led me down the front steps, his arms steady and strong around my shoulders. Mrs. Whitaker, bless her heart, gave me a little way from her porch. Mr. Barnes, who usually kept to himself, nodded in approval. It was as if the whole neighborhood had been waiting for this moment for someone to finally stand up and say, "Enough is enough." As we reached the car, Jason opened the door for me and helped me inside, his movements gentle and careful. He turned to Megan, who was still standing in the doorway, and said, "I'll call you later. Right now, my mother comes first." With that, he slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. The drive to Jason's apartment was quiet. At first, I stared out the window, watching the familiar streets roll by, my mind racing. I was scared of what would happen next, scared of being a burden, scared of the changes this would bring. But beneath the fear, there was a flicker of something else. Pride. Who knew my son had it in him? I'd always seen him as my little boy, the one who used to hide behind my legs when he was scared, the one who needed me. But today, he was the one protecting me. After a few minutes, Jason reached over and squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said quietly. "I should have seen this coming. I should have done something sooner." I shook my head, tears prickling. At the corners of my eyes, "You did exactly what you needed to do," I whispered. "Thank you." We pulled up to his apartment and he helped me inside, making sure I was comfortable before unpacking my things. He made me a cup of tea, just the way I liked it, and sat with me on the couch, his presence a balm to my battered spirit. For the first time in weeks, I felt safe. I felt loved as the sun set outside, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. I realized that sometimes the people you think you know best can still surprise you. Sometimes the quiet ones are the bravest. And sometimes the worst moments in life can lead to the most unexpected blessings. We left that house together, Jason and I, our heads held high as if we were walking a red carpet instead of the cracked sidewalk of our little suburban street. I could feel the eyes of the neighborhood on us, but for once I didn't care. In fact, I almost relished it. There was Mrs. Whitaker standing on her porch with her arms crossed, giving me a proud little nod. Mr. Barnes, who hadn't spoken to me in years except to complain about my rose bushes, actually clapped. I even caught a glimpse of Sophie and Jack Turner peeking out from behind their mother's legs, wide-eyed and whispering. It was as if the whole block had been holding its breath, waiting for someone to finally stand up and say, "This isn't right." And now, as Jason helped me into his car, I felt a strange sense of victory, like I'd just won a battle I didn't even know I was fighting. The drive to Jason's apartment was quiet. But it was a comfortable kind of quiet. The kind where you don't need to fill the silence with words because just being together is enough. I watched the familiar streets roll by, the trees swaying gently in the evening breeze. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I wasn't going back to that house, to the cold stares and sharp words. I was going somewhere safe, somewhere I was wanted when we arrived. Jason insisted on carrying my bag, even though it was light as a feather. "You just focus on getting inside, Mom," he said, his voice gentle but firm. He led me up the stairs to his apartment, a cozy little place filled with the scent of fresh coffee and the faint hum of jazz music. It wasn't fancy, but it was warm and inviting, so different from the icy atmosphere I'd left behind. He showed me to the guest room, which he'd clearly gone out of his way to prepare. Fresh sheets on the bed, a stack of my favorite magazines on the nightstand, even a little vase of daisies on the windowsill. I couldn't help but smile. "You didn't have to go to all this trouble," I said, but Jason just shrugged. "You're my mom." Of course I did. He made me a cup of tea chamomile with just a touch of honey, The way I liked it tan sat with me while I sipped it. Its presence, a comfort I hadn't realized I'd been missing. "You're not alone, Mom. Not ever," he said, and I could see the sincerity in his eyes. It was the best medicine I could have asked for. Better than any pill or treatment. Better than all the hospital snacks in the world. That night, as I lay in the soft bed, listening to the quiet hum of the city outside, I thought about everything that had happened. The pain, the humiliation, the fear, but also the love, the strength, and the unexpected support. Sometimes the worst moments in life really do show you who has your back and who needs to be shown the door. I realized that I'd spent so much time trying to keep the peace, to avoid rocking the boat, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to stand up for myself. Or, in this case, to have someone else stand up for me. I thought about Megan, my daughter-in-law, and couldn't help but chuckle. I imagined her pacing around that big, empty house, stewing in her own self-righteousness. Maybe she'd finally have some time to think about her manners or lack thereof. Who knows? Maybe she'd even learn something. Stranger things have happened. But honestly, that was her journey, not mine. I had my own healing to do, and I was finally in a place where I could do it. The next morning, Jason made pancakes burnt around the edges, but delicious all the same. We sat at the kitchen table laughing about old times, sharing stories I hadn't thought about in years. It felt good to be needed, to be loved, to be part of a family again. I realized that home isn't just a place, it's the people who make you feel safe, who lift you up when you're down, who remind you that you matter. Over the next few weeks, I started to feel stronger. The chemo was still tough, but it didn't seem quite so overwhelming with Jason by my side. He drove me to my appointments, made sure I ate even when I didn't want to, and never once made me feel like a burden. We watched old movies, played cards, and even started a little herb garden on his balcony. It wasn't the life I'd planned, but it was a good life, a new beginning. The neighbors kept in touch, too. Mrs. Whitaker brought over her famous chicken soup, and Mr. Barnes offered to help with anything I needed. Even Sophie and Jack Turner drew me a get well card, complete with stick figures and a big smiling sun. It was as if by leaving that toxic environment, I'd opened the door to a whole new world of kindness and support. And as for Megan, well, let's just say she's got a lot of time to think about her manners now. Maybe she'll come around. Maybe she won't. But I'm not holding my breath. I've learned that you can't control other people's actions, only your own. And right now, I'm choosing happiness, health, and the people who truly care. So, if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're not valued, remember this: you deserve better. You deserve love, respect, and a place to call home. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what hurts you and walk toward what heals you. Here's to new beginnings, to family, and to the unexpected heroes in our lives. And if you're ever feeling alone, just remember, you're not ever. So what would you have done in my shoes? Ever had a family drama that turned into a neighborhood spectacle? Drop your stories in the comments. I'd love to hear them. And if you want more real-life tales with a twist, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, 'cause around here, there's never a dull moment.